Hi students, let's go ahead with the next module of clause analysis. Now we've already seen that in clause analysis there are two types of questions. Okay, what are they? The first one is identify and analyze the clauses. We've just finished that, and then we have analyze the clauses and state the relation. So we have already studied how to identify and analyze the clauses, that is to separate the main clause and subordinate clause, and to identify whether it is noun, adjective, adverb, and the 9 types of adverb clauses also we have studied. Now we go on to see how to analyze the clause and then further state the relation. So we are going to study this type now. Okay, so let's go ahead. We are going to study the relationship of a noun clause to its main clause. But before that, a little more about noun clauses. A noun clause does the function of a noun in a sentence, students, and we know that a noun always will answer the question what. So, asking the question what in the main clause can identify it. If the question is analyze, then you only write subordinate noun clause. But if the question says that state the relation of the noun clause to the main clause, then there are 6 types of relations. And what are they? Subject of the verb, object of the verb, object of an infinitive, object of preposition, complement of a verb, and inapposition to a noun or a pronoun. Oh, 6 types. Don't worry, students. We shall do these, and believe me, it's very, very simple to identify which of the 6 types do we have there. So, let's start. Now, what he says is true. So, we take with an example here. First, identify the main clause and the subordinate clause. So, by now, students, I'm sure you know that very easily. Is true is the main clause, and what he says is the subordinate clause. Now, students, identify the type of subordinate clause by asking a question. And we know the questions what, which, when, where, how. But here if you ask the question what to the main clause, what is true, then definitely your answer is the subordinate clause, what he says. So students, this is a noun clause. Now, here the sentence starts with the subordinator what. That means the sentence starts with a subordinate noun clause. And remember students, it's a noun clause which is like a noun. And whenever a noun is in the beginning or before a verb, it is the subject. As simple as that, students. Here, when the sentence of the noun clause starts with a subordinator, then it is called a subject of the verb, and in this case the verb is in the main clause. So students, here this is how we write the sentence. It is true. Now, where does the it come from? Students, if we say is true, doesn't make sense. It is not sounding so complete. So we will write it into brackets and say it is true, main clause. And what he says is subordinate noun clause, subject of the verb is in the main clause. So students, we know that when the subordinate noun clause comes in the subject position, it is subject of the verb. It will always start with the subordinator. Next. Now, assuming that the remaining sentences are noun clauses, we are not going to go into main clause, subordinate clause, how to ask the question and get the noun clause. We assume all of them are noun clauses. Now, we go on to define the remaining relations. Okay. Now, the truth is what he says. So, we know that the truth is the main clause. Why? Because the subordinate clause starts from what. So, what he says is the subordinate clause. Now, we know that we have to ask the question. So, when we ask the question, we know that we get the answer. Now, when the main clause here, what he says is subordinate noun clause, and the main clause is the truth is. Now, let's read what is given to us there. When the main clause ends with an incomplete verb, students, we have given you the list of verbs. Is, am, are, was, were, will be, because, become, seem, look, appear. All these verbs are incomplete verbs, and if the main clause ends with an incomplete verb, so you can see there the main clause ending with is, then it is subordinate noun clause, complement of the verb is in the main clause. So students, here the truth is the main clause, and what he says subordinate noun clause, complement of the verb is in the main clause. Students, very simple. The verb is incomplete. So what he says is completing the meaning of the verb is, therefore it is called as complement of the verb. Now we go on to the next one. I like what he says. Again, we know that I like is the main clause. What he says is the subordinate clause, and of course it is a noun clause, as I've already told you. Now here the main clause ends with a complete verb like. Students, I like. Here, compared to the verb is, like makes complete sense. Therefore it's a complete verb. And what are complete verbs? Complete verbs are those which have a complete meaning. In other words, the words that you studied, is, am, are, was, were, will be, become, seem, look, appear, all these are incomplete verbs, and all other verbs besides these are complete. So just remember, incomplete will be these and any other verb is complete. So when the noun clause ends with a complete verb like here, then it is called as subordinate noun clause, object of the verb like in the main clause. So students, we have already done 3 types of noun clauses. What are they? We have done subject of the verb, object of the verb, and we have done complement of the verb. Students, here how do we answer this? What he says, subordinate noun clause, object of the verb like in the main clause. So students, we have already done 3 types. One is subject of the verb, the other one was complement of the verb when it ends with an incomplete verb, and the third one we did is object of the verb when the main clause ends with a complete verb. Now we shall do the remaining 3 types in the next module.